Hello, and welcome to Required Reading, the podcast that revisits the most impactful books from our childhood. My name is Erin Bowles. I am an actor, writer, and comedian, and today we've got perhaps the craziest book we've ever done. Our guest today is Georgia Shenk. She's back from our first episode. She is a satire and screenwriter who has written with Reductress and The Second City, and most recently she performed at 54 Below, which you can see on social media at Georgia Shenk on Twitter and Instagram. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Erin.
Our book today is another Meg Cabot book. It is called Airhead, from I think 2008 or 9.
Yep, 2008.
How would you give a back of the book summary for this book?
This book is a period piece of 2008 girlhood. So I would describe this book as being Em Watts is a 17-year-old girl who lives in the Lower East Side, just like me. And she goes to the equivalent of like an Elon Musk Tesla store, and a supermodel is also there at the same time, and a giant television falls on her head, and when she wakes up a month later, her brain has been put into the supermodel's body. Yeah.
And the surgery has been conducted. No, that's a good summary for now. Let's leave it there. So how did this book come into your life? What was the first time you read it?
As many books from my childhood go, I was browsing Atlantic Books in Lewis, Delaware, and I picked up a book that was called Being Nikki. And Being Nikki, it turns out, is the second book in this season. But I picked it up because my older sister, the most beautiful woman in the world, is named Nikki. And I wanted to be my older sister so badly. I was like, finally, a how-to. So I took it home. I don't think I even read the back of this book. I start reading it. I'm like, what is going on? Because, mind you, I'm in book 2 of this absolutely inspired plot line. And I'm like, wait, what is happening? So I kind of piece it together. I'm halfway through book 2. I'm like, did she have a brain transplant? And then I was like, okay, well, now I got to go get the first book in the series. And I went back, read the first book in the series, and I'm convinced I'm the only person in the history of time who has read this book series. And I needed to talk about it with someone, which is why I brought it to your attention.
I'm so glad you did. I did not realize that it was a trilogy until I finished the first book, and I was like, thank God, because
I know. There's a lot to think about.
For our listeners, Georgia has a phenomenal background of the New York Post front page of the Bimbo Summit, a pop culture moment that if you don't know what that is, just give it a goog, because it was a moment, like truly a moment in time, a meeting of the minds.
Absolutely. What I would have given to be a fly on the wall of that car.
Oh my gosh. I guess let's just hop in. What I was saying before is the other aspect of this is that Elon Musk, the character, because it's
right.
Like, it's a superstore that I felt like was like almost like a Walmart or like a
I think Target. At the time in my brain, like 7th grade me was like, what is the equivalent of this in the real world? And the closest thing I could come up with was like Walmart or Target. But I think in like modern day terms, I think the closer thing is Elon Musk. And I have also renamed Nikki, the supermodel in question. I've renamed her Gigi Hadid in my head. I'm just like, what is happening with these people and their world? Because it's so familiar, but at the same time, it's so built out like a science fiction book.
It really is. Like, I did not know anything about it. Oh, by the way, I have a kitten.
Hi. Hello, kitten.
She doesn't photograph very well because she's all black.
Oh, she's beautiful.
She'll be here.
Okay.
I started reading this and I didn't know the plot. I didn't know the premise. I just knew Meg Cabot, who did Princess Diaries.
Princess Diaries.
And that is a phenomenal book. And this book truly is. So she Emerson, the young girl, the everyday,
not like other girls.
She's in love with her boy best friend, and they are different from all the other kids because they love video games.
So true.
Her body dies, but her brain lives. And Nikki, the supermodel, her brain dies, but her perfect, beautiful body lives.
Yes. So we are to believe that at the exact same time that this giant flat screen television, which protesters have shot down with a paintball gun,
Yeah.
has only landed on M, the main girl whose beautiful thoughts we're reading.
Yes.
And at the exact same time, Nikki Howard, the supermodel, has an aneurysm.
Oh, yes, because she has a
And
heart defect.
so, no, a brain
No.
defect that they just never caught
Oh
is
my
what we're told.
gosh. Right.
That's important for
Oh, for later
trilogy. Yes,
books?
for later books.
Oh.
We are told in this book, which is important to know, that Nikki had a brain defect that nobody had caught, and she had been managing to live a perfectly healthy life up until the exact moment this girl gets hit on the head with a flat screen television, and then she has an aneurysm. And I remember in the seventh grade, this is the first time I heard about aneurysms, and I was like, that is my ideal way to die, I think. I just
I
remember
see it.
being 12 and being like, that sounds really peaceful and
Yeah.
nice. But at every like dead end job I've ever had, I was like, God, I wish I was having an aneurysm right now. And I can trace it back to reading this book in the seventh grade.
One of the things I love most about this book is that it is tied into like a tremendous conspiracy
Yes.
that Elon Musk basically is like, we have to keep this model alive because she's the face of our business. And in order to do that, we're going to make this child and her family sign an NDA for $2 million that if anyone spills the beans, the Emerson Watts is now inside Nikki Howard's body. Beans. Her poor family, who are both professors. Her mom is a
Yes, they're
professor.
both college professors at NYU and I think Yale. That figure of $2 million was so interesting to me because it doesn't seem high enough for
Yeah.
a model of Nikki's caliber, especially when we're told that M has access to Nikki's funds and she theoretically could make withdrawals to like
That's
buy them out.
true. Yeah.
I'm like, how much money does this girl have if you have enough to like live in a Soho loft
Yeah.
and like buy your entire family like brand new iPhones in the year of their creation, 2008? Like, what is going on? What are the figures here? What are we
Yeah.
working with?
And they're implied that this procedure, this is not the first time this has been done. I highlighted it when they actually talk about it, but it's implied like Princess Diana this happened to.
Also, like
Yeah.
Tupac and
Oh
different like
yes.
musicians and like crazy. You know, at the time of this book being written, I believe Michael Jackson was still alive, but it would have you believe that like
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, if he were still walking among us, would have had a full body
Yeah. I
what am I?
mean,
Yeah,
a
right?
brain transplant, I guess.
Yeah, full body transplant. That's what they call it in the book. And
Yes.
then brain transplant is like considered the not politically correct way of phrasing
Yeah.
it, which I can't is so funny to me because I'm like, I can't imagine anybody would care.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so Emerson has to start living Nikki's life being a model.
Yes. And we learn that she is Nikki not from the doctors, not from her parents, not from her sister, but because she is kidnapped
Yes.
by Nikki Howard's best friend and my favorite character to ever be written, Lulu Collins.
Yeah. I love her.
I love Lulu Collins. I would die for Lulu Collins. I think if I could bring any character from books to be my best friend in real life, I
Yeah.
would choose Lulu Collins.
Move over, Mr. Darcy.
Oh
We
my
have
God.
Lulu Collins.
What an icon.
I mean, yes, there's four boys orbiting Nikki slash M.
Yes.
But really, Lulu is the MVP. You mentioned her sister. Her sister is the reason all of this happens. Her younger sister
Right.
is a member of The Walking Dead.
It's what they call the cheerleaders at this
Yes.
school.
The sister is the reason why M ends up at the
The
superstore.
mega store opening. Yes.
Yes.
So Frida is 14. She's 3 years younger than Em. She wants so badly to have her brain put in Nikki Howard's body. And
She's so jealous.
she is so jealous. And so when Em finally wakes up from her coma, well, actually, let's go back a step, because the reason that the flat screen fell on Em in the first place is
Yes.
because Frida is reaching out to Nikki Howard, the supermodel, for an autograph. The protester shoots this paintball at the flat screen television, I guess knowing he's about to murder a teenager.
It
Um,
really the eco terrorists are barely touched on later
it's
on. The,
fascinating because they're written as like criminals, like
yes.
murderous criminals. And it's that's bonkers on its own. So this flat screen television falls. Em pushes her little sister out of the way, and as a result, gets squashed like a bug in front of a British pop star,
Yes.
the supermodel who is now having an aneurysm, and her 14-year-old preppy cheerleader wannabe sister.
Yes.
Oh, and her crush. Oh my
Yes.
God. How embarrassing to die in front of your crush.
Oh my God. And Christopher there's just there I think something that's great about Meg Cabot is how specific she is in all the details. And I
Right.
feel like in this book it just makes it funnier and like more
Right.
bizarre. I don't even know like where how to structure this conversation, so I'm just gonna pop open my phone notes.
Of course. So
And yeah,
if I could jump in, I think one thing that Meg Cabot is really, really good at, and this I think we talked a little bit about in our first podcast episode when I was on to talk about The Summer I Turned Pretty. It's really interesting to watch writers grapple in first person narrative with like a teenager's self-doubt and how they're phrasing that, because it's so interesting to watch Em like explain her like obvious like teenage girl like, okay, I think I have a crush on this Gabriel Luna guy, but that's so stupid and I would totally never. It's
yeah.
so interesting to, I'm like, girl, this is in your head. You're monologuing right now. You do not have to feel bad for thinking this guy is hot. And I just wanted to save her from
I
that.
know. First off, one criticism, Meg, the number of times that Emerson corrects in her head, she's like, I was biting my nails, or should I say Nikki Howard's nails? And
Oh,
in
it's
my heart,
so
or
often.
should I say it was every page.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, um, there's some light slut shaming that goes on, maybe not even light. There's a conversation of like the awkwardness and perhaps inhumaneness of celebrity. They keep repeating this phrase of like, well, she's the world's #1 teen model. And I was like, who is that?
Who's judging that?
Who do we have such a thing
Do
now?
we
Did
have
we
an
have?
equivalent? Did we have it then? I think maybe Kendall Jenner, the
Oh yeah.
Hadids. I think those are like the only equivalents I can think of from when we were teenagers where it was like, this is a teen supermodel. But even then, I don't think they were ever given like the like responsibility level that Nikki
Yeah.
is like proclaimed to have in this book.
Nikki is a brand ambassador, which I think
Yes.
is crazy. It's if like the Hadids became the face of Walmart. Yeah.
Right. And when we think about like who are our current brand ambassadors and for who, we've
Yeah.
got Anya Taylor-Joy for Dior. Like I'm really racking my brain to think about like who this is.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's like the closest example I can think
yeah.
of.
I
And
mean,
you don't typically think of like, again, I keep going back to like Elon Musk, Tesla
mhm.
for like the equivalents, because he's the only person I can think of that has multiple entities and for what?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Walmart or Target don't really have like a face of the
No.
brand.
Yeah. They don't even in the way that like I was thinking about their corporate mascots. There's like Flo from Progressive and there's
Right.
Jake from State Farm and all those things, but all of those are fictional characters. And in your background you have Paris Hilton and I keep thinking like is that kind of it because she was like an heiress?
I guess
You
so, but
know?
even then, Paris Hilton she was grandfathered into fame,
Yes,
like
that's true.
literally grandfathered, because
Yeah.
her grandfather founded Hilton Hotels. It's really interesting because in so many ways, I was dialed in 2008 to like TMZ, Perez Hilton celebrity culture. And even at the time, I remember being like, I don't see this in like our world, but they so frequently will bring up like celebrities who were famous at that time, like Lindsay Lohan, Misha Barton. And I'm like,
Misha Barton.
oh my God, poor Misha Barton. Misha Barton in this book is cheating or is having an affair with Nikki's on again, off again boyfriend, Brandon Stark, the son of Elon Musk. It's just so funny to watch it exist in this world where like so many of these celebrities were going through like these actual problems at the time and like their physical health and like being like scrutinized in the press and slut shamed and then like having to juxtapose that with 17-year-old model who was in charge of Target. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm building the world in my head.
Yeah, and I mean, should we be asking Meg Cabot of the Princess Diaries to be hyper realistic? No, but
Of course not.
when I was doing prep for that episode, Meg Cabot worked as like an NYU RA for years and years and years. And so I think that really helped like tap into the voice and
Right.
the realism. And I think that was like a very well, I think that's like a hope you have is like suddenly you'll find out that you're a princess or something. And I guess there's a degree of wish fulfillment in this of like what if I became a model and then
Right.
the turn is like, oh, modeling is hard and like this is work.
Right.
Which I appreciated. Yeah.
I think so too. I really, really appreciated that because you get to see from Frida and Lulu that like these girls that M for so long has like shut down as being like somewhat beneath her for caring about vanity or fitting in or popularity. She's like, oh no, this is actually hard work. And
Mhm.
she doesn't really give Whitney the like head mean
It's
girl at her
true.
school disgrace. But you can see that even Whitney, when Nikki comes to the school and she's like really trying to like strike it cool with her, she like can't give her that same sympathy or empathy.
Mhm. Yeah. And the school aspect is an important plot point. One of her conditions of becoming Nikki is that she goes to Emerson's high school, almost explicitly for the purpose of spying on her crush best friend and making
Yes,
sure he's not. And it's so late in the game that she's like, oh, he might be emotionally affected by this.
right. She's been like quote unquote deceased for like a
Yes.
month and a half, 2 months at this point. She is dead, gone, and buried.
Yes.
And when she gets to the school, her first thought is not, wow, my best friend looks so upset. It's, why did he cut his hair and
Yeah.
why is he flirting with this girl? And
I
like,
don't think it's even like flirting. It's like
no, he watches this girl's presentation in their speech class and she's like, what is he doing?
disgusting.
It takes her so long to understand that he could possibly just like be going through it.
Just be very sad about his best friend dying. But
Yeah,
I think there's like a degree. I think Meg Cabot accurately does present how when you are that age, you are so rigidly stuck in your point of view,
right.
which is absolutely true. And I think something in doing this podcast is revisiting that mindset and it helps you forgive a lot of yourself. I think we talked about that in our
Right,
first
in
episode.
the first episode. And I really liked watching her go through that thought process in real time.
Yeah.
And like I was laughing at how often she course corrected her like inner monologue. But it is really funny to be like, wait, but aren't I kind of doing that by
Mhm.
judging these people? And it is
Yeah.
really interesting to see her call that out in herself. We don't get to see a lot of Christopher in this book, but I was really interested in what your thoughts about him were.
I mean, so weirdly, and maybe this is like it being in 2008. In my head, Christopher was played by Christopher Gorham, Do you remember him?
Interesting. No,
He
I'm
was in
Googling.
his last name is Gorham, I think.
Okay.
He was love interest on Ugly Betty, which is how I first saw him.
This is how you
And
see Christopher in the book?
yeah, for
Wow,
some reason.
interesting.
And
Okay,
this
I
is
have a
like
very
yeah.
different mental picture
Ooh.
of Christopher in the book. Do you remember Jason Dolly from the Disney Channel?
Let me look. It's definitely a familiar name. Let me look.
Okay.
Oh. From the time travel movie
Which time travel
with
movie?
Nicholas Braun,
Oh, I
the
guess, yeah.
Minutemen.
Yes. I am thinking Jason Dolly from the Read It
Okay.
and Weep era when he
Read it
has
and
like the
weep.
long, oh, I loved Read It and Weep.
Oh,
But like the long, shaggy skater hair, and when he
yes.
gets back, it's like cut. And
Mm,
he's become more chiseled and looks older.
yeah.
And I think again, we talked about this in episode 1 too, but grief kind of does that to you where
Yeah.
it ages you preemptively. And I think that's part of what Em is noticing about his like post Nikki change.
Yeah. And there's a really interesting dynamic with him and his father that is kind of
Yes.
only lightly touched on, but that his dad is in the military and that his dad always wanted him to cut his hair. But I'm thinking this is 2008. This is like Justin Bieber, big hair swoosh era.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about Ellen DeGeneres. I'm just thinking about there's a scene when Justin Bieber is performing on Ellen where I think he like winks at her or like blows her a kiss or something and she's
Right.
very confused.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. I I remember at the time of reading the books being
Mm-hmm.
like, Christopher is my dream man. And
Mm,
rereading it, I was like, who is Christopher, though? We don't get a
exactly.
lot about him in this book. And so it's really easy to make him whoever you want him to be in your head. I remember him having like a much stronger, sweeter, vulnerable personality. And when I'm reading this back, I'm like, this is a blank page of a man.
Yes. And that made me think a lot about like maybe that was how a lot of my crushes were at that age
Yeah,
of just like it really does not matter who the person is because I'm
right.
never going to get close to them or get to know them or do anything so it is just like a lot of projection. And the book ends with does she fully tell him or does she
No.
just say like
He, as Nikki,
yeah,
says, "I heard your friend died," and I remember seeing it happen because I was also like standing right
right
next to
there.
you guys when she died. And then she starts crying and drops like a page of glow in the dark dinosaur stickers on his desk, which I guess is an inside joke between them.
Yeah.
But what's so funny, I got so caught up in this book that I was like, I kind of need to start book 2 now.
Yeah.
And so I did. And in the beginning of book 2, she's like, Christopher didn't get my glow in the dark dinosaur.
It was just like neat stickers. Thank you.
He's like, all right. Weird.
Supermodel loves stickers.
Glow in the dark dinosaur stickers, I guess. She's like clearly thinking she just like dropped the most insane truth bomb on him, and he does not get it at all.
Oh, I love that. Because it does feel like a huge moment, especially because
Yeah,
like she has to pretend that Nikki has amnesia. That's
right.
the big explanation for why she doesn't know people on set, and that's why she doesn't know this or that. So it's a huge turning point when she decides to say, I remember the moments
Yes.
before my aneurysm. And that's a huge choice. And there's also the element of it's 2008 and Elon Musk is monitoring our computers, and our protagonist only knows because she plays video games. And one of the big moments at the end is she says, we're not using the modem anymore. We're using
Wi-Fi. Oh, I like when she said that, I had to like mentally time travel to
Yeah.
2008. I was like, what did it look like when we were actually plugging modems into the computer? I was like, I guess they did blink. And oh God, it really is such a period piece because it puts you back in like everybody was still comfortable being mean to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody still uses modems. Everyone is reading Perez. Crazy because it's so detached from the world we live in now that you forget. I always think of 2008 as being 2 years ago, but I guess when you really think about it, it was like a very long time ago. It's getting closer to 20, which is scary. And it's like, oh yeah, that was
16, yeah.
a different universe.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you get it's the thing always with celebrity of like your world is suddenly a fishbowl and there's no sense of privacy and you know she's getting paparazzi pictures taken of her that end up causing problems. And I think the interesting thing is it's 2008, so technology is present, things are changing, and
The
that
very
like
first iPhone has
yes,
just come out.
surveillance state or whatever is about to be everybody and all of our lives.
Right.
Um,
Like we have MySpace, we might have early era Facebook.
yeah, it might be like the year that Facebook gets
Right.
big.
Obama is in his first year as president.
Oh my
Like
God.
we
Yeah.
this is a very different timeline, and it's you have to really remind yourself of that very frequently in order to believe the universe that you're being put in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't know, the flat screen element does a lot for me.
Yes.
Um,
Flat screens, if I remember correctly, this is also around the time the Wii was popular.
yes.
So, like, you have to really remind yourself that, like, oh yeah, not everybody had a flat screen, and those were like so fancy for the
Hmm.
time. I remember when we got the Wii in my family's house, my dad invited my grandfather over to play it, and he was playing Wii bowling and had the didn't have the strap attached to his wrist and
Of course.
accidentally like flung the Wii remote at my dad's flat screen television and was so scared he broke it. And that's the era that this book
Yes, there
takes
were
place.
like news stories about you must use the wristband of your Wiimote. You
Or
must do
you
it.
will break your television. Oh my gosh. Tiger Woods somewhere just like freshly cheated on his wife, if
Oh
I am
man.
imagining correctly. Gossip Girl, maybe first year in its
God.
television debut.
The next thing I have is she's discovering how her body is different, and I kind of hated this. Is that Emerson is just a regular girl and she loves junk food, but when Nikki eats sugar, it tastes bad and it's
Yeah.
yucky. And suddenly she's like, I love vegetables. That's just what my body likes. I just want
Yeah.
to know how you felt about that. How did you read that?
I felt the exact same way because Nikki is purportedly skinny because of her acid reflux. Now, I have acid reflux.
I have always had acid reflux.
I have acid reflux. I am not a supermodel by any stretch of the imagination, and I love sugar.
Yeah.
So I found this to be discriminatory.
It's so weird because I think I thought I saw acid reflux and I was like, okay, acid reflux model. Are we gonna get like a bulimia storyline? Like, is that coming?
That would have been more truthful in my
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
like honestly more time period appropriate
Oh
too.
my gosh, yeah. Something very much in Gossip Girl,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, and I don't know if Meg just didn't want to go all the way there, which is why she's like, sugary foods will cause you to get sick to your stomach without having to lean all the way in.
Yeah.
But I kind of wish she had just leaned all the way in because it would have been less like, okay, don't sugarcoat this for me.
Exactly. I think it is like you. I don't know if you feel like Meg isn't like trying her hardest, but it certainly feels like she's like holding back a little bit.
Yeah, she almost doesn't lean in all the way.
Yeah.
And I remember there was another book that I kept getting mixed up with this book while I was reading in my memories. There was a book that was like about a girl who was a model, and she was also like a wallflower, and it was like shrinking wallflower model. I can't remember what that book was called at all. But I remember that in that book, she does faint from bulimia, and she also like has a scene where they have to give her a Brazilian wax and like same exact age,
Hmm.
same like target demographic. But that author is willing to lean into like
Right.
the like uglier, harsher
Yeah.
like aspects of what it meant to like really have to model femininity back then.
Yeah.
And Meg is just like, acid reflux.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, right.
Yeah. There is this thing of like it's not entirely so because like there's people, hair and makeup people who are like, you're not taking care of your skin, like you're not taking care
Right.
of your hair. And she touches on that of like, oh, well, Nikki's like natural look actually takes time and effort. But I don't think they really talk about like, and maybe I just missed this, but I don't think they really talk about like what it means when like your entire body becomes.
Right.
But something I did appreciate is that she touches on like every single person here on set, every photographer, every hair and makeup person, all of these people are depending on me for their salary.
Right.
And
I thought that
mhm,
was really, really great to
absolutely, yeah.
place. I really appreciated that because again, it does go back into how M just considers this entire world to be so vapid, but now she's just considering for the first time that like gaffers have a job.
Yeah.
They have rent that they have to pay, like medical bills, probably. Nobody's like funding their brain surgery. Like,
Exactly.
it's crazy to watch her like process in real time. Oh, yeah, this is bigger than just me and bigger than like the supermodel. And actually, she's not like the worst person alive for having this quote unquote easy job. I think the other reason modeling books were so interesting at that grade is because America's Next Top Model was very big at the time.
That's very astute.
And
Yeah.
so you would be watching Tyra telling all these girls how to be a model and being like, wow, this is so difficult. And then reading and be like, this is an easy job, and being like, no, it's not actually.
Yeah.
You'll see.
I loved that her mom is like a feminist scholar professor because my mom, not 100%, because she was a Russian scholar, but otherwise, yes. And definitely I came up in the world of like, models are stupid bimbos. That's the word.
Right.
Bimbos.
I was by far, I think, the most feminist woman in my family, even from like a very young age. And I think I have slowly converted them, which I'm proud of.
Yeah.
But like my mom was like a teenage beauty contestant. And her mom was like a teenage beauty contestant. And my sister was like not prom queen, but prom duchess in her first year. And I was like this little like nerdy shrimp. And I remember just feeling so different than them. And like I couldn't figure out why they all seemed to get it and I like didn't. And I remember being like, okay, well, what makes me special is my brain. And so like I would read books like this, and theoretically the M's would be like who I would relate to on paper. But as I'm reading it back as an adult, I'm like, I don't know. Like I feel like you need to give these girly girls some slack. And I think that's something that's been gained in the last like decade is
Yeah.
more like positivity and like empathy for your fellow woman. Like
Yeah.
just in general, it's hard to have to like constantly be performing
Mm.
for other people. And I think no matter if you are a tomboy or a girly girl or you're not trying to adhere to any gender norms, it's still difficult and you're constantly being perceived. And I think that's what she is noticing under like a greater strength of the magnifying glass,
Yeah.
especially after she becomes more high profile and feels more eyes on her.
I think that's really astute, especially like that time period. I think feminism was a personal individual thing. It was especially like being feminine was bad. Like embracing any kind of femininity was somehow selling out or undercutting someone else. And femininity could never be for yourself. It was always
Right.
for someone else.
It's like for a boy is
Mm-hmm.
like very much like the overarching theme of where we meet M
Yeah.
at the beginning of the book. And I think by the end of it, at least I like to hope this is
Mm-hmm.
like the correct reading of it. I think what Meg Cabot wants you to take away from this book is that like, hey, take it easy on take it easy on your fellow woman.
Yeah.
Which is great because again, that's not like a super popular theme we were seeing pushed at the time.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, even when we look at the Princess Diaries, and I haven't read the Princess Diaries the book. I
Mm.
have obviously watched the movie. When we think about the Mandy Moore cheerleader characters,
Yeah.
or like any other woman in that book, like, well, even Lily, I don't think is
Yeah.
like a very good friend in that
Yeah,
book.
exactly.
Like
That's a
it's
huge point, like a huge conflict in the film is that Lily sees
right.
her becoming feminine
And
and thinks
she hates
it's,
it.
yeah.
And I feel like this book is a lot more progressive, and I don't know if it means to be, but it is like, hey, give her some slack. She's
Yeah.
trying her best. And like
Yeah.
we all are. And I think by the end of the first book, has a newfound appreciation for that. And she's more frustrated with everybody who's pushing it and feels
Yeah.
that way. Feels the same way she felt in the beginning.
Yeah, she's really frustrated with the bullies, especially. She's frustrated by the things that she can't talk about, the ways that like her past life is no longer available to her.
You had mentioned the Lulu scene towards the very last
Oh,
chapter of the book.
yes.
And I thought this was like a fascinating scene, and I did want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes. So I was going back in our text, and then I see all my texts about Wicked, and that's a different time and place. But yeah, during the final chapters, Lulu and Nikki's on again, off again boyfriend kidnap her from the hospital, as you said.
Right,
They dress up as nurses and take her out on like a stretcher and then put her in a limo and
right,
take her back to their loft. And Nikki slash M is just getting it adjusted to the situation, is saying, I'm not this person because the $2 million, piano over our heads is not there yet.
right. It has not crashed because, again, she's been kidnapped. Her parents have not told her, her doctors have not told her that she is Nikki Howard, but she has been kidnapped
Yes.
by people who are convinced that she is.
Yes, and it's not until she gets in the back of the limo and sees her reflection in the rear view mirror, I think, that
Right,
she realizes that she's Nikki Howard. And so Lulu kind of doesn't believe that she believes something is different about Nikki. She is nicer now, there is something inherently different, but I don't think she's too dumb is the impression that we get to really get it.
she
But
is an airhead.
exactly, the titular airhead. But she tells Lulu, like, I have this crush on this guy and I don't know what to do because Emerson obviously was illiterate when it came to boys, but Nikki and Lulu get it. And Lulu goes on this very long discussion about how she feels straight men work. The first line I have highlighted is straight guys only feel three ways about girls. First, they either love you and they show it by writing a song about you and asking you out, and everything is nice and fun like it should be. Second, they love you, but they're scared of their passion for you because it's so strong. So they stuff it way, way down and ignore you or do stupid things like make fun of you because they don't know how to express it any other way. Because they're immature little babies and are too shy to say, write a song about you. Or third, there's something wrong with them and they start out nice and loving and then turn around and do stupid things like sleep with other girls behind your back, like Justin Bay, who is Lulu's boyfriend, who is
Yes, and
also,
quick
yes,
flashback to earlier in this book, we find out that Justin, who is Nikki's Lulu's
yes,
fiance, he's given her a ring. He gets to the loft. He's like, I need to see Nikki. And he calls her down and M is like, do you mean Lulu? And
your
he's like,
girlfriend,
no.
yeah,
He's like, no, just you. Don't tell Lulu I'm there. So she gets down. He starts making out with her. Men cannot stop making out with Nikki Howard. As M so gracefully puts it, oh my God, Nikki is a slut when
yes,
we get back to the slut shaming aspect of the beginning. But she eventually, she's like, no, I'm not that kind of girl. And Justin is like, okay, I'll call you later. And she tells Lulu, and Lulu is like, not shocked,
no,
knows this, was like, oh, yeah, no, I know. And Lulu is convinced that M has not had a full body transfer. she has had a spirit transfer,
Yes.
not unlike the movie 17 again.
Another classic.
Yeah. But she's like, no, you got Freaky Friday'd into
Yes.
Nikki Howard's body. So Lulu exists in this world where she both knows that the person she's dealing with is not Nikki, but does not seem to grasp that the new person who inhabits Nikki's body doesn't have Nikki's memory. So she's like, oh yeah, no worries. I don't blame you at all for the Justin thing. I kind of hoped you just like wouldn't do it again after the spirit transfer. And I was like, yeah, no worries. I don't want to make out with your boyfriend. So later on, at the end of the book, which is the scene that we're referencing, where Lulu is giving her this speech, Lulu is like super impassioned because she's like, oh, I just gave Nikki this speech last month and now I have to give it to you again. Yeah. And this is when she brings up her spiel about all boys being in love with you.
Yes. Lulu, again, is like, yeah, I know Justin is cheating on me, but every time he feels guilty, he gives me necklaces and jewels and stuff. So, like, this works for me. Like, the arrangement we have is fine with me. Which, honestly, slay. You go, Lulu.
I know. She's also still young, and it's so easy to forget how young these girls. They're 17. They're still minors. Like, I can't speak for everybody, but when I was like in my teen years, I wasn't letting guys treat me the way they absolutely should have been. So like it's hard for me to criticize that like mentality for Lulu. I want better for her. But I'm like, okay, all right, girl, you do you. You're only 17 once. But I loved this scene from Lulu because in so many ways, is it true that every single person you're ever going to meet is going to fall in love with you? No, of course not. However, is that the speech that you want to hear from your best friend, your mom? Yes. Yeah. And it's like the confidence raising speech that like we all need. Yes. And it doesn't hurt anybody or your confidence to go out into the world and be like, why wouldn't they love me?
Yeah.
So like who does it hurt for anybody to feel this way? And I loved that this is the first female friendship that M has ever had. And it's really cute to get to witness her like having this like really sweet organic moment of girlhood for the first time where you're like, I don't know if my crush likes me, and your friend is like, of course he does, and like slaps it into you. And I thought that was really sweet.
And I like the way it's written because in Nikki's head is like, I don't know if I buy all of this. I don't know how true this is, but I am going to go talk to my crush. And I like that balance. Absolutely. And I think the issue in it that I feel like is not, obviously it's like partly dated, but also I don't know how much like Meg actually believes it, is that like girls make boys fall in love with them.
This was like, I like, exactly. I did kind of like squint my eyes at this part a little bit. I was like, is she being satirical when she's saying this? There is a line in this same scene where at first you're like, yes, Lulu, all men should be in love with you. And then it jumps to, and it's our fault if
it's our responsibility.
Our responsibility if they get the wrong idea about how we feel about them. Which is like, okay, that's a step too far in my opinion.
Exactly. You have to take responsibility for that and not do things to encourage him.
I wanted to give Meg the benefit of the doubt with this chapter and think she was going for like a Barbie monologue, America Ferrera at the end scene, where she's like saying all of this sarcastically, but it's really hard for that to come across in just novel form without like the like written context clues. So I'm like, okay, either she's being satirical right now, she wants her reader to like understand the fine line, or she genuinely believes this, which is the worst possible thing.
Exactly. Because that whole paragraph ends with, men are the weaker sex. Didn't your mother tell you that? Which is like a great zinger, a great line.
Right.
And yet there was a lot of really concerning stuff before that, Meg.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's sandwiched in. I like the first part of the sentiment. I like the last sentiment that men
Mhm.
are the weaker sex.
Yeah.
Because again, that's just like your girlfriend's like boosting you up.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. However, when we're pinning the blame on any woman, that it's their fault if a man is in love with you and you're giving him the wrong impression, or if you don't know how to harbor
Yeah.
that responsibility. Like, okay, that's probably a little too irresponsible for like a middle school grade level.
Yeah. I mean, there's another line, we have to be so, so careful all the time not to break men's hearts. Men's hearts are very fragile. Our hearts aren't nearly as delicate. Which, like, no. Stop
I
it.
lo- I looked it up today because I was really curious and I knew we were going to talk about this scene. And it was like the one scene in the book that I had like the strongest
Mm-hmm.
feelings about, just because I really did like the first part of it.
Yeah.
And then I got to those sentences and I was like, ooh. I looked it up because I was really curious, and this doesn't really seem that far off from a speech my mom would have given me.
Yeah.
And I say this with love, but maybe not. I wouldn't necessarily agree with my mom 100% if she was giving me this speech.
Yeah.
I looked it up because I was really interested at how old Meg was, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the exact same age. They're both like
Oh.
57. They born in 67.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, it's possible this is like a Gen X thing,
Yeah.
or like this is how their moms raised them.
Yeah.
And like, this is sad because you don't want this for a woman of any generation,
Mm-hmm.
but like, it's possible she does. She was raised to think, hey, like it sucks and it shouldn't be your responsibility to carry, but
Mm-hmm.
it is. And
Yeah. I think partly it all depends on who it's coming from. I don't think Lulu necessarily has the capacity to do this, but if it was, and there aren't really older women characters at all in here. There's like I think Nikki's
there's a
oh this is
housekeeper.
yeah, and there's like Nikki's assistant who or manager or something who is only in
Yes.
one scene. She like comes and says hi. But something I did want to talk about actually that I had forgotten is that Nikki is self-made. She has no family, at least in the first book, no family to speak of. She got this job. She's, number one teen model in the world. Supposedly, like, came from nothing. I assume that comes back in the later books, just in the broad
So
strokes that I know.
I do. I'm gonna try very hard not to spoil
You
this,
can
but
do it
it.
whatever you want.
Do you want me to spoil it?
Go for
Okay,
it. Yeah.
audio listeners, spoilers ahead. um, so in the opening of book two, Nikki is like on location, or M is on location on a shoot, and she gets a call from Lulu, and it's like, "Hey, a hot guy's at the apartment for you." And M's like, "Who? It wouldn't be Christopher." And then Lulu describes the guy, and it kind of sounds like Christopher. It's like rugged, blonde, hot, muscly, and M is like, "Oh my God, it's totally Christopher." She like leaves the set of this location, goes all the way back, and it's Nikki Howard's brother. Oh, Nikki Howard's brother is there to say, hey, our mom is missing. And so the rest of book two is them like trying to chase down Nikki Howard's mom and figure out where she is. And then at the end of book two, I believe, I haven't gotten this far yet. I could be totally making this up. I believe is when we find out that Nikki is still alive. Her brain has been put into the body of a deceased drunk driver. And Nikki's mom is hanging out with the drunk driver's body and like some kind of I haven't gotten this far, so I'm going entirely off of my seventh grade memories at this point. But they're like in a cave in like the Tesla like underworld. I'm like really trying to figure. I know it's crazy, and Nikki's pissed. She's like, "Give me back my body," as if like this was M's idea to take her body in the first place.
Oh my god.
But it ends, I think, with Nikki slapping M in Nikki's body. I think book three is them trying to get on like the same page. I know, I don't think it's possible for them to like Freaky Friday back. If
Yeah.
I have not read this book in over 10 years. So
But the
Unclear.
audiobooks are available
The
online.
audiobooks are available and they are on your e-library app near you, and they are so good.
Yeah, that I was looking at the Nikki Howard was apparently a total skank who was sledding around behind her best friend and roommate Lulu's back.
Oh my God. It's so one thing I did find very interesting is that purportedly M is only turned on by these men because Nikki Howard's body is turned on by these men.
Mm-hmm.
However, M prior to this has never been remotely near a boy
That's true.
other than Christopher while playing video games. Not close enough to kiss, not close enough to have any contact. So I feel like she's also just like denying that it's possible she could be turned on by this sort of guy.
Yeah.
It's like, girl, I don't think you know yourself well enough yet to discern
No.
who's getting turned on by this.
And I think it's a really sweet sort of sequence of her like discovering physical pleasure, and I think that
Yeah,
is not looked down on by Meg Cabot. I think it's mostly like the situation is like that it's bad to be with like someone else. And I think
right,
like the criticism that M has for Nikki is that it's like not monogamous, you know?
right,
But I think it's also Nikki, like, and she kind of, or sort of goes on this of like, but this is like, I enjoy this. This is nice. And I think that's
right.
just really nice.
We learned that M like really likes kissing. And like,
Yeah.
good on her. She should. Like it's a
Yeah.
normal thing to like. But I think the first time she says something like remotely slut shamey
Yeah.
is well, when she meets the British pop star in
Mm-hmm.
the club as herself, like not even as
Yes.
Nikki yet. She's like, ugh, I guess if you're into this sort of thing, which I'm totally not, even though this guy is really dreamy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, kind of sounds like you are.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she kisses Brandon, Nikki's on again, off again, Elon Musk boyfriend, she's like, ugh, Nikki loves kissing this guy? Gross. Slut. But like then she's like, I can't stop thinking about how to get him to kiss me again.
Yes.
Which is it?
And I like that it's both, you
I
know?
know. And it's totally fine. It's realistic that it's both for a girl like M.
Yeah.
But like I do want her to be like, okay, maybe I like it a little more than she does.
Yeah. I don't know. And I know that I, as like my 26-year-old self, is very different from my 17-year-old self. But I feel like I, in this situation, as a person who like was never attractive, you know, in my mind to anyone else, that I would be like, let's get kisses everywhere. Woo! You know, let's go
Right.
crazy.
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have my first kiss until, well, I'm trying to think. My first kiss was out of pity from my
Aw.
friend in the back of my sweet gay friend in the back of our friend's car on National Kiss Day. I was 15. And I was like, okay, great. And
Got it.
I remember being like, this rocks. And then I wouldn't have my like actual first kiss until the following summer. And then I was like, I need to kiss all the time. And it
Hmm.
was like that was the first time I was with somebody who like actually liked me.
Yeah. I didn't have my
And
first kiss until it was like a week before I turned 19.
oh, I feel like that's a great age.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember feeling late to the game.
Yeah.
And I remember for so long being like, I'm never gonna have my first kiss. No one's ever like not even without a hint of exaggeration. I remember being like, nobody's ever gonna like me enough. Like
Yeah.
this is it for me. This is my lot in life. And it's really easy at that age to be like, no one's ever gonna think I'm pretty ever.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to read how M describes herself in the book as being like kind of schlubby and like not attractive. And then you look at the back of the book and like there's a picture of like the model who they have playing M, and this just looks like me on my way to CVS.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I'm like,
like
this
she
is
wears
literally
sweatpants.
a
Yeah.
picture. Like she's in jeans and a
Hmm.
hoodie, and I'm like,
It's a
I
normal
this is
person.
this is just me walking around.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I would not go on to describe. I find myself to be pretty, and maybe it's
Hmm.
taken several years to get there, but I don't know. I don't think that I would ever describe the back of book model as being an unattractive girl.
No. Yeah, it's hard because, like,
It's towing a fine line where like you want to like give your protagonist, your 17-year-old female protagonist who's like dorky and hasn't been very far yet in
yeah,
life, you want to like give her an honest inner self voice. But it's hard to do that without like your reader who's impressionable and like sees themselves in her being like, okay, well, I guess then I am if she is
mhm.
muddy brown eyes. I mean, is that all I'm good for? Yeah, like it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. However, you are a girl, is you're not
Yeah.
gonna do it right.
I maybe a little I have a little bit of beef, pre-existing beef with
Hmm.
Meg.
Hmm.
Today I got my eyebrows waxed, and I have ever since I watched The Princess Diaries for the first time been very self-conscious about my eyebrows and
Hmm.
them being like so bushy. So anytime they are like even slightly overgrown, I'm like, I have to go Mia Thermopolis myself now, or no one's gonna think I'm pretty. And that's like still a lasting
Oh my
memory that
gosh,
like
yeah.
lives in me even as like a 28-year-old woman. Like,
Oh yeah, that
that's
stays with you.
realistic that
Hmm.
like you want to give like your protagonist an honest like inner voice, but at the same
Yeah,
time, what at what cost does that hurt like real
real
young
girls.
readers or viewers?
Yeah. I might have said this on the podcast already, but I my defining eyebrow moment was fourth grade at the bus stop on picture day, turning to a girl and saying, "Do I look okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, except for your unibrow."
Stop. That's so mean. But it is just like such a wild book. And it's like, what if we took the Princess Diaries wish fulfillment and we took it a step further?
Yes. What if we combined Princess Diaries, Weird Science, Freaky Friday, and put it in a blender?
Right. Like, what if we yassified the already yassified the Thermopolis?
Yeah. What if we take Mia Thermopolis and she's blonde and you know
And skinny.
um no, I think Mia Thermopolis of course is too tall. That's her body issue already. We can't add something
Right.
else in
It's like,
there.
what if we made being tall good?
Yes. There's only one. There are only two places where being tall can be good. For boys, it's basketball. For girls, it's model.
Modeling. I am famously 5 feet tall, and in the
Same.
years of America's Next Top Model, I would hear them describe long legs. And I audibly one time, I didn't even like, I wasn't talking to anybody in particular. I guess my mom and my sister were also in the room with me, and we were all watching America's Next Top Model. And I went, I have long legs, I think. And my mom, without skipping a beat, went, yeah, for a short person. It's like, okay. So that's how I learned I could never be a model.
Oh my god. I think I definitely had a mom who looked down on modeling, but I still to this day, like I've become accustomed to my height, but I will look down at my legs sometimes and be like, that's all? This is as far as it goes?"
Ugh. Anytime I go to like my favorite clothing store,
Mhm.
which is Aritzia, I'll walk in and then I'll get to the dressing room. And each time it's like I have amnesia about this one thing, which is that they do not have mirrors in the dressing room. They only have one large communal mirror in
No.
the like
Lobby of
lobby,
the yeah.
I guess, like for lack of a better word. And there's like at any given point, like 16 statuesque, gorgeous model women in their store. And then I walk out, I'm like, I am not the target demographic for this store, I
No.
don't think.
Nobody
And
look at me.
I'm like, I won't go out there. So I have just started like bringing my phone into the dressing room and like setting it up on like a makeshift
Mhm.
tripod and walking away. I'm like, I will not put myself
No.
through seeing my legs in a window. And
No.
why can't there be short models? I feel like I would like my legs so much more if we would let short girls model.
Oh, I know. Justice for short people, of course. The most maligned group in the world.
Unbelievable.
I feel like that's all I have to say on this book, other
Yeah.
than I'm so excited to listen to the other two.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the other two, especially now that I like have started the second book and I want to see how close my memories are. Because it really is so funny what your brain will tell you you remember about a book, and then when you
Hmm.
get in there and seeing how different it is
Yeah.
from the
How
reality of it. As always, I just love hearing your takes on books in general.
Thank you. Georgia gets my Wicked updates now.
One of the things I'm proudest about is that I am the person who introduced you to Wicked the book.
It was always there, but I had never read it before. And
Yes.
then the audiobooks are phenomenal. John McDonough, he really kills it. He's so
I've really
good.
got to get in there.
I have such big feelings about the movie. I hope I'm not disappointed, but we'll see. What were your biggest takeaways in terms of how this had changed since when you read it the first time? Like, what were the big broad strokes?
I remember when I was a seventh grader, I really, like I said, I was super into celebrity culture. And I think I was more closely, if I'm being honest with myself, I was probably closer to Frida in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted is I really did want to like be beautiful like my sister and my mom and like fit in and like be popular. I think in terms of personality, I was more M. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was really at the time what I loved about this book was like getting to see from like my like brain's perspective what it would
Yeah.
be like to wake up in that world. And I think as an adult now, I'm just like, this is so interesting. Like I said, I was really mostly just like so curious about it because I really wasn't convinced that anybody else had ever even read it or heard
Yeah.
about this book. And after I posted about reading it on Instagram, like two or three people were like, "Oh, I loved this book." And it is so interesting. It's like, why were none of us talking about it then?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was really just interested to see what I was so hyped up about it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a fascinating concept that I think is very well executed
Yeah.
by Meg Cabot. And I loved getting to read it. I don't know if I related to wanting it as badly as I did when I was a preteen, which is good and healthy. I think we shouldn't want the
Yeah.
things we want for ourselves when
Yeah.
we're 12 at 28. But I was like, oh, okay. This is very different than how I remembered it, but in like really interesting and fulfilling ways. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't in like, I can't believe I ever liked this. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I would phrase this differently now as an adult than
Yeah.
I would have reading it.
I think the only thing that I sort of didn't realize before this in our conversation is like how much media has changed and that like magazines were still a big thing and that was like the main contributor to I think how we talked about like what the ideal female body was.
Yes. And
It's so
not even
huge.
just magazines, but like gossip
Yes.
forums were so intense at the
Mm-hmm.
time and like so hardcore on
Yeah.
everyone, just like across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like every time you opened a newspaper, it was like Britney has a meltdown,
Mm-hmm.
or like Lindsay Lohan faints outside of club, or like
Yeah.
anything like that, where you're like, okay, they really wanted us to believe that like these wild, uncontrollable women
Mm-hmm.
were like the villains of the story. And it is so interesting, especially when you consider how much the media was in control at the time. They
Yeah.
really were pushing this narrative that women are the bad guys, not the media.
Mm-hmm.
And don't you feel so much better now that you know that you're that like this is everything you should want to be, but at the same
Right.
time we hate them?
Exactly. Yeah. It
There was no winner. Like you could
never.
be the M and you would like be undesirable, or
Yes.
you could be the Nikki and like be such a total skank slut
Yeah.
that has no brains in her head. And
Yeah.
like there was no winning outcome. And I mean, is there now? Not really, but I think we are like slowly trying to make steps towards finding a
Yeah.
more even playing field. And it's tough because it's baby steps every day. And I don't know if we're anywhere near close, but it
We're a few more steps closer.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is like the first book I can remember where it was like, hey, the media is more in control of this than you probably think.
That's so true. Of like even you talk about Lindsay Lohan, and so like let's think about other young women who were stars at the time. Like you either went down the Lindsay Lohan track and did drugs and had to go to rehab, or you were Anne Hathaway. You were successful and well behaved, and for some reason people still hated you because you were like earnest and kind.
I remember so specifically with Amanda Bynes at the time, and this is
Yeah.
pre Amanda Bynes, like really going through it. She was considered like the goody two shoes, the model girl. She made it out of the Nickelodeon system. And so if she can do it, why can't you? And we see how that kind of pressure cracks, like systemically and historically. There's not really a way out of it without it coming for you. And I think there may have even been like mentions of like the Olsen twins in this book from
Yeah.
time to time with like their eating disorders. And it's like villainizing them for that. It's like these are
Mhm.
girls who have been famous since they were literal toddlers.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of pressure. And you've been putting them through media training and making them support their entire families.
Yeah.
And like, there's so much pressure. Are you going to be the good girl or are you going to be the wild child?
Mhm.
What are you going to be? There's no right answer.
Yeah, you'll fail no matter what.
Right.
It's
Like,
so
we can't
surreal.
wait to eat you up.
Just now, like, realizing how crazy it is that, like, every single night growing up with my parents, we watched Entertainment Tonight and E! News. Like, it was
Yes.
normal news.
Yes. My mom, I one time got grounded for
Mhm.
something. I had my phone and my television taken away. And my mom was like, you can watch the news, but only with a blanket on your head. And so I got to like sit and watch the news with my mom, but she put a blanket over my head and the news was Entertainment Tonight. And I was like, thank
Yeah.
and I was so happy that I could listen to Entertainment Tonight. Also, every pet in my family, their middle name is Anna Nicole Smith. Like everyone, like my mom's pets, my sister's pets, my pets. I have Violet Anna Nicole Smith and Sammy Anna Nicole Smith in the other room right now. Why was celebrity culture so like it's such a big part of me that I
It is.
can't remove?
Exactly. And also, like, after E! News, it was like the Kardashians or something. And so we would turn to a different channel because we were too highbrow for that. But we would come back later that night to watch The Soup, which was making
Yes.
fun of everything else.
I
Yeah.
remember my most pathological fear in the seventh grade. I had a YouTube channel with my best friend, and I was like, I really can't let this get out because if Joel McHale finds it, he's gonna make fun of me. And I have such a big crush on him, and I don't want him to make fun.
He's apparently a real sweetie. He's a
Well,
very
I'm
kind
glad
man.
to hear it. It's great to know that
I
like
know.
he's not gonna eat me alive.
I mean, I guess that brings us to our final question. Would
Yeah,
you consider it required reading?
I would, especially for like anyone who considers themselves. Actually, first I would require them to ask, would you consider yourself a feminist? And I want to hear
Mm,
their answer. I want them to read the book and then report back to me when they're done. And the answer better be yes, but in
yeah.
a more sophisticated way than I
Nuanced,
thought,
yeah.
more nuanced way than it was in the beginning.
This might be the most fun read I've had on the podcast because the twists and turns keep coming.
It's
Yeah.
so goofy. And I feel like the following books just get more convoluted and wild. And they're so
Um,
fun. And I really, really can't wait to hear your takes on
oh
them.
my god, I'm so excited.
Me too.
Is there anything you'd like to plug?
No, like you said in the beginning, I did just perform at 54 Below. So if you find me on socials, you can see me singing both parts of the confrontation from Les Mis with my chinchilla.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
great.
what I've got going on right now. I also write screenplays and pilots, and I would be happy to share them with you if you want to read them.
Amazing. Thank you so much for
Of
coming
course.
back.
Thank you, Erin. Love chatting with you always.
Thank you so much to Georgia, her second episode. what a book. What a book. You know, if you're ever saying, hey, Erin, what's just the most entertaining book you've read on the podcast for all of its twists and turns, I would say this one. I would say this one. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, Livy Scott joins me to discuss Only the Lonely, the first book in the Madison Finn series. Look up Madison Finn, Finn with 2 N's. It's a fun time. It is 2001. We are discovering computers. My name is Erin Bowles. You can find me everywhere at Erin R. Bowles. The R stands for rich, as in the richness of Tim Curry's voice in the audiobooks for A Series of Unfortunate Events. Oh, delicious. All right, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody. I love you. Good night. Watch the WNBA.